it, and I want this to be as interactive as possible. So actually along the way, do ask questions, pop it onto the chat box if you want. This will be fairly top line because I think everyone comes from different industries and face different issues. So for that reason, I'll also try to maybe have a little bit of an exercise. And if you want to follow along, so have yourself a piece of pen and paper to be able to kind of take notes with what's relevant to you. So I'm going to try to share screen right now. And here we go. So if at any point you can't see or you can't hear me, please just pop that into the chat or just turn on your speaker and interrupt. But I'm Renji. Thank you for the introduction, Aisha. Essentially, who I am is I'm passionate about authentic communications, and that's outside of the career I have. I'm passionate about it in leadership, in my family, in my relationships. I'm very driven by bringing ideas to life, which is great. Like that's primarily what Matt had spent most of our time doing. I love nurturing passionate teams, and whenever possible, I try to make a difference. So just a kind of acid tester on how interactive we are as well. Would anyone here be willing to kind of introduce themselves as well before they go on, just so I have a feel of who we're speaking to as well?
Don't be shy. You can screen your videos. Go.
Yay, we've got videos.
Hi, Renji.
Hi.
I'm Nadia. I have a startup as well. And my startup is called Kita Coexist. And yeah, I can't wait to hear you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Kita Coexist? What do you do?
Yeah, actually, how I started Kita Coexist was because I used to work for UKM, and then I do a bit of training, and then I decided to do a lot more with the underprivileged. So that's how I started Kita Coexist. But then what happened to me was the idea was there, but then I sort of deviated into a lot of other things. And like training for doctors. Now at the moment I do training for the healthcare industry. But I do want to get back into the B40. It's just trying to find ways to get back into it. So I do a lot of trainings. I do some branding for some of the doctors. But my passion is actually working with the underprivileged or underserved children or communities. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Nadia.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll let everyone else talk now. I'm actually nervous as well. I'm pretty shy too.
Hi, my name's Natasha. I was in the startup world for about 3 years until the beginning of this year when I went back to corporate. I still have my fingers dipped in the startup world. And so I thought this was actually one of the areas we really struggled with was PR. So I thought this would be an interesting talk today to listen.
And what were you doing in startup?
So we had a quite an innovative biotech product from the US that we had imported. It's quite new in the world. And we were the main distributor for that here in Malaysia and Asia.
Awesome.
Oh, we still are, but it's sort of sitting on ice.
Yeah, I can imagine as well. But thanks so much for joining, and hopefully that gets somewhere soon as well.
Thank you.
It's a long journey. And anyone else? No pressure, but. Okay, no worries. All right, so I'll just go ahead.
Hi everyone.
Oh, yay, it is. Yeah, we
Okay,
can
I
see
thought I
you.
wasn't.
Connected for a second. Okay, hi. I'm Sufiz. I have my own startup or consultancy. So I do gamification and behavioral design consultancy. I've been doing this for about 4 years or so. So to those who don't know what gamification is or what behavioral design is, it's basically about making things engaging, whether it's a product, a service, a website, an app, or a training program. I'm also a trainer. So I also conduct workshops in the same subject. So teaching people how to gamify or inject a behavioral design or whatever they're trying to create or whatever they want to do. So that's a bit about myself.
Very cool. Thanks, Hafiz. All right. So if
Looking forward
there's
to
no
learn
one
more about PR.
else, let's hope. But yeah, if there's no one else, I'll just go ahead. So a very quick introduction, again, about myself. I'm the founder and managing director at Mad Hat Asia. We do term ourselves a people first creative communication agency, simply because we specialize very much in consumer lifestyle brands. So, and I'll share some of them after. But we do everything that we do with people at the heart of it, whether the way we actually run the company and our culture, to the way that we communicate. And that's me right there. So I am hoping that this plays. So please let me know if you can hear the audio. I thought it'd be a lot easier to do this than to give you a slide by slide on what we do. Is the audio coming through?
No, there's no audio.
Yeah, that tends to be the issue.
Unless you just YouTube it, like on the browser.
Yeah, no worries. And we can skip through this anyway. This is about you, not so much what we do. So a little bit about some of the brands that we work with that you might recognize. Like I said, most of the things that we do are consumer facing. And, I do recognize that, things like the biotech product or even the gamification tends to be a little bit more B2B as well. But I think a lot of the same principles that we apply when we're looking at consumer facing lifestyle products still apply no matter who it is that you're talking to. Very often, I think people think of it as like, oh, but it's investor relations or it's corporate comms. But at the end of the day, they are people as well. And so the same thought process still applies. So these are the companies that I'm involved in. So I'm the founder of Mad Hat and one of the directors in Kepohchi and Kapau PR. So Mad Hat's a full service creative communications agency, which means that we do end-to-end communications from everything from design through to media relations through to social media. Kepohchi is something that we actually found was a way for us to digitize some of the work that we do. And that has kind of spun off to be something else this year, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, where we found a lot of businesses were actually struggling. And if there was anything that we could do, we could leverage the media eyeballs we already had on a newswire for our own press releases to be able to serve people who could use that visibility as well. So we started accepting press releases and press materials from other relevant businesses to be able to kind of get the visibility, the media that we reach. And Kapau PR it's really in its infancy stages, but it's designed specifically for startups who kind of, are not looking at very high level strategy at this stage. They just need to get some word out. Tends to be a lot of needing to get in touch with investors or just get those news articles that they can put in front of them. But you'll notice that, what's in common with all of them is PR. And these are a couple of quotes that I really like about PR from Richard Branson. A good PR story is infinitely more effective than a front page ad. I liken that very much to you saying that you're really awesome, and the difference that is from someone else going, hey, she's really awesome. And that's really, I think, the gist of why it becomes very, very powerful. And it becomes very kind of authentic, and it becomes credibility. So that's PR. So what is it? I think everyone, it's actually a question that I struggle with as well. And I've been in this for the last 14 years because it's ever changing and because it really depends on who you ask. And this is one of the first questions that we ask when we interview someone, for example. But at the face of it, really, it's the practice of managing communications between an organization and its publics. And that's, I think, in the widest sense, without having to go down into what the actual work is. And at Mad Hat, what we've done is we've really looked at it. We've kind of broken that down. And our definition really is it's about getting the right messages to the right audiences. And I think that becomes a lot of the struggle when people are starting out in PR. And you'd be surprised, even for the bigger brands who've been doing it all the time, there's a tendency to go, this is my message, so I'm just gonna like menyebar it to everybody who would hear it, as opposed to kind of really mashing who the right audiences you're trying to reach are and what the messages that would appeal or connect with them are. And that's what we do in our everyday and what we see as essentially public relations. So yes, what happens is we end up using all these tools. And I think if I can, I'll share this deck with everyone and you can refer to it there. But essentially, these are really just what's to be able to get your right messages, your right audiences. So media relations tends to be one thing that everyone thinks PR is, the be all and end all, but it also involves things like your influencer engagement, crisis management, conceptualizing events, because those are touch points and forms of messaging as well, down to even social media and the content that you put out on your own platforms, and how you get it out. So things like your email marketing, the way you do reporting and analytics to be able to improve that, that's actually all part of getting your right messages to the right audiences. So that was all the what, but I think what really matters is to start with the why. And especially, I think, to startups, there are a lot of whys to do PR. And it is kind of a pity that it often becomes one of the least priorities in a startup business. It tends to be one of those things, in my experience, where we only look at it because I'm raising funding, and therefore I want to be able to show potential investors that, oh, look, you know, I got an article in the Star. And that's a very viable reason as well. But otherwise, I can also understand with a finite budget, there becomes this battle between, am I going to spend this budget on additional Facebook ad boostings, where I'm actually going to be able to measure direct kind of click-throughs and the inbounds and purchases from there, or invest in PR, which is a much, much longer game, but is really a branding game more than anything. So you're kind of in it for the long term. And that can be a difficult kind of investment to make, because not so much of the cost, but the commitment that it takes. So when it comes down to startups, I think the 4 key reasons that I think are paramount in considering it is the credibility. Again, that credibility that we understand from being able to see, hey, you saw that article they wrote about such and such and such, versus having constantly just seen ads about it. Stakeholder visibility, this is where, for example, appealing to investors will come into play. Thought leadership and authority. So it's good to see that actually this is rising a lot more now. And I think people don't even realize they're doing PR by it. But with the rise of all social media forums and especially now with a lot of panels and all that kind of thing happening online, more and more people are getting involved on behalf of their business to put forward the thoughts that they champion. And inevitably what that does is put your company behind that thought, and establish yourself as a leader and authority. And establish connections. PR is not a sales tool, or it very rarely is. It really is about connecting with your audiences. And we'll go into that a little bit more later as well. But at this junction, what I really wanted to actually ask was for the people in this room to actually take a minute and think about, and think about, it could be for a particular product, it could be more general, like overall for the company, but why is it that you are considering PR? And what is it that you look to achieve? Now, of course, everyone's look to achieve at the end of the day is, want success, want to make money. But when you break it down into why am I embarking on this exercise, what is it that you want to be able to look to achieve? Are you looking to have businesses actually come in and inquire? Are you looking to be ranked in one of the top 3 in your industry within the next year? And so on and so forth. But why is it that you're considering it to begin with? Because that will shape what your message is going to be and who your audience is going to be as well. And that becomes really, really important, like to just start with that why. So I do encourage you to, like, you know, just jot down, there's no right and wrong, but I think just the action of actually having to think about it. Why is it that you're considering PR? And I guess, so what we'll be going through today is a little bit about why it's important to identify who your audience is and how you can kind of go about doing that. How are you relevant? You as a business, you as a group, you as a community, why is it that you are relevant? And then looking at the media mix and planning that, and that it is so much more than just, again, the Star or SAYS or BFM, and what that media mix looks like. And, you know, I'll share with you a bit of a model that hopefully you're able to use while you're going on in your journey after. And then just some top line kind of touching on do's and don'ts in terms of writing your own media materials, reaching out to media, and engaging with influencers. So you'll notice that, you know, much of this is actually focused on what you would traditionally consider PR, but otherwise we could go on forever. So who is your audience? And I strongly believe that this is the single most important step that is unfortunately very often overlooked. And you cannot get too detailed with this. So the key here is to actually create audience profiles. And what happens is you'll find that you have very many profiles, and that's actually great, right? We have been through, like, we take hundreds of briefs from clients, and too often when we go, who's your target audience, they go millennials 21 to 45, and I'm like, excuse me, number one, millennials are not 21 to 45, and they are not all made the same. So who is it that you're targeting? Have a think about what it is their actual insights are. What are their experiences that may relate to what you do, or what you're selling, or why you're doing your business. Have a think about what their likes and dislikes are, but even what their typical day looks like. And you know, this kind of teeters into design thinking a little bit, but it's really important to kind of understand who you're talking to, because otherwise you're really just trying to scream on a megaphone. And the beauty about where we are now is that with the mix of online and offline, you really can be targeting those people the way you want to. And you want to be doing that, because if you're trying to reach everybody, you are reaching nobody, essentially. And we've heard that before, but yet it tends to be practiced. So I think it's a very key part in, like, the marketing process, but it's also very, very important in kind of building the communications strategy that you have. And, you know, just some ideas on how it is that you build these profiles. It is, you know, survey monkeys and Google Forms, and asking the questions that you may not kind of understand, or speaking to, whether it's your current customers, if you already have them, or the lookalikes, so the people who you feel might be potential customers, and actually just speaking to them. You'd be surprised how forthcoming and willing to help and willing to just talk people are, because especially when they understand that you are trying to solve an issue and get a better understanding for their insights. You can connect on social media, and Google is your friend. So, like, what we often do is actually start with Google, and see what it is that we kind of collect over hours and reading, and then form the gaps that we don't quite understand, find that demographic, get the message out to them via surveys, or actually just going and speaking to people. So, you know, for example, if you are selling, like, ice cream, and you think that, this is going to be for the, it's ice cream with some isotonic thing in it, and you think it's for the sports people, go down to the futsal courts and actually speak to people as they're coming off the futsal courts. You don't have to do it for sampling, you do it for insight. But I cannot stress how important it is to get a good understanding. You will find convergence in your insights. It doesn't mean that if you've got 10 profiles, you end up with like 10 different campaigns. It means that you're finding convergences in who your audience truly are. The second step, and like I'll go back to that definition that we said before, PR being getting the right messages to your right audiences. And while step one was identifying who these audiences are, step two is that process of understanding what that right message might be for them. And I really like, again, this quote where, messaging, it's like a first date. If all you do is talk about yourself, there will not be a second date. And I think this is especially true in areas like content marketing, and which PR is essentially part of. But you want to be able to craft messaging that addresses insights and addresses kind of real issues that your audiences are experiencing, or you feel they may resonate with. So for example, sorry, my screen is, but like what actually would have a feel sit in their shoes, and what is it that would make the audience kind of give you their attention? Attention is so scarce right now. And for them to, we called it for social media kind of thumb stopping, right? But like, what is it that's going to capture their attention enough? And the only thing that captures people's attention is something that they resonate with, or at least tickles them, or it's funny. So you stop at cat videos because it's tickling you, it's funny to you, or you stop at something that you connect on values with. Because at the end of the day, if you find how your brand shares commonalities in your audience's values, that essentially is how you build connections. And if anything, this is a platform to be able to connect. I think that we think that connection sometimes is literally like I chat with you and then you chat back, but it's really about being able to find each other on a similar plane. And because at the essence of public relations is storytelling, it's about appealing and connecting on those stories more than anything. PR as an exercise should not be advertising. And I can't stress that enough. It is not purely self-promotional. It is storytelling, right? So how do we craft these messages? And these are just some of the ideas on how to kind of get there. Using who your audience is, what will stop their thumbs or what will grab their attention? What do you share in common with them? And how do you build that connection via those two? So the third area is you know who your audiences are and you have an idea of how you want to appeal to them, is then to actually not pigeonhole yourself and understanding that we're actually in a much better off position now than we were maybe 15 years ago, in that media is a lot more accessible. That also means that media is a lot more noisy, and there's a lot more clutter to cut through as well. But I think what we want to be able to stress is that media does not only mean literally, like I said, online portals or published newspapers or magazines. So we break it up into the peso model, which is essentially paid, earned, shared, and owned media. Paid media are things like, you would traditionally understand it as paid media equals advertising or advertorials. But very much now, your titles like Says or Vulcan Post, they make their money from media collaborations, which means that it's content creation collaborations. Or even influencers has been, over the past 7-8 years, has been a huge, big kind of industry on its own that is essentially paid engagement, because they have built an audience very often much larger than media audiences, traditional media audiences as well. And so it is, how do I engage with you? How do I make this mutually beneficial, often with a transaction, to leverage your media. And then, things like social media ads and Google ads. Now, why that's part of a PR mix is because sometimes that is really good leverage for your owned media, or even as bargaining power for some of your earned media. So speaking about earned media, I think this is where a lot of people kind of pigeonhole PR into, but it is also where I will be spending most of today in terms of the DIY on. But I wanted to be able to share this so that during question and answer and things like that, we can kind of go back to this. But earned media are the things you understand, like, press releases and interviews and the media relations and influencer relations and, events and things like that. Stuff that gets you, I guess, unpaid media. It doesn't make it free, but you earn the media truly by virtue of how interesting it is, your news. It's 100% by virtue of that. And then there's shared and owned media, which encompasses areas of social media or partnerships. So it becomes content that is more deliberately created, but then hosted on your own platforms, which in this day and age is super important, not just from a visibility point of view, but things like SEO, for example. So how it is that we use shared and owned media. Are there any questions so far? Just jump in at any point. Right. So we look at the DIY kind of section of today, and I've broken this into writing your media material. So, you've got an idea for who you're speaking to and what your messages are. How do you put that down on paper? And again, I have this caveat that it doesn't always have to be on paper. So in this day and age, having a video press release to be able to communicate who it is that you are and what it is you're trying to do is not a bad thing, but it comes back to your objectives. So for this, we have looked at it in terms of the traditional press release model, and how do you get your basic press release done. It's obviously very, very brief. And so, please just jot down any questions you have. The reason why this is so important, and, again, I pull a quote, which is, press releases are a $1 billion industry that creates 99% waste. Media are inundated with people kind of, please run my story. I'm the best in the world. I have the greatest news. Everyone feels that they do. And that's great. And that's why, you're in the business. But at the end of the day, there can be things that makes you part of that 1% that isn't kind of thrown out. And let's try and take the steps towards doing that. So first three being, do you have a newsworthy angle? And we are taking this scenario where you want to get your business onto the star because you want to have more signups and inquiries on the business that you have. And so you write a press release that tells exactly what it is your business does. You need to step away from that and go, is what I'm writing about timely? Or when I say trendy, meaning relevant right now, right? Is it timely? Is it unusual or truly unique? And does that come across? Is there human interest in it? Because that tends to be something that will then kind of raise its newsworthiness. Do you have an interesting innovation? And is it impactful? Now, we're not saying it has to be all these. These are some acid tests, but you really are wasting both your time and the media that you're reaching out to's time if you're not really cracking what your angle is. And I guess angle isn't like spinning a story per se. It is literally going, this is what I have, and this is why other people will care about it, and crafting it in that manner. And these are just some of the ways you can do that. The other is, of course, the basics do include your what's, your why's, your where's, your who's, your when's. And this will be applicable everywhere. Very often, again, I think like there tends to be this focus on the what we do. This is what we do. But again, you're appealing to someone who is reading this and want to understand its story. You're not replicating your About Us page of your website. And you're not trying to encourage immediate kind of conversions. Earned media would be more times than not the wrong medium to try to do that. It really is brand building. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't tell your full story and provide as much information that is relevant that you can. So what you do, why you're doing it and why it's relevant, where it is that this happens, where it is it came from, where it is I can get it, who it is that's responsible for it, but also who it is that benefits from it or should care, and when it is that this happens. And very often, like if you don't have some element of when, you risk kind of being thrown into the non-timely basket and then getting lost forever. So even if it's something that's been around for a while, pulling out an angle that makes it timely and relevant to today and having some kind of urgency often helps as well. And the third is attention spans are really short, and those are consumers as much as the journalists or editors who are reading your press release. So what you want to be able to do is write everything that you need to write, look at the newsworthy angle, go as long and panjang lebar as you want, but then look back and ensure that that first paragraph summarizes the core information that you need to put across. So if they read nothing but the first paragraph, will they understand what it is that you're saying? Obviously not in depth, but will they kind of understand already? There are a few kind of like approaches to this where sometimes the idea is, oh, my first paragraph should actually grasp them and make them intrigued and give them lots of hints for them to want to read more. In my experience, while that could work, it is a lot more risky than already proving to them that this is going to be worth their time, as opposed to trying to fish for curiosity. It is, remember, a press release isn't actually an article. It is a press release. And they have chosen to give you the time to read through your 1 or 2 pages. Tell them why they're going to be giving that time in their first paragraph. So include quotes. You would have seen this if you've looked at press releases. Very often, there will be 1 or 2 quotes that come from key stakeholders. Now, the reason you do this is press releases are largely to be written in a third-party language, right? So if you have quotes while you are actually giving people different perspectives, so you have, and it doesn't only have to be founders or CEOs or the lead scientist, right? It literally is anyone who's a stakeholder who has a perspective on what you're saying in your press release. And that offers kind of breaking that monotony and providing already some form of buy-in while they're reading it. So it's not just kind of, again, an article or a copy and paste of your About Us page. And the images, context, and links. So why these are really, really important is, when was the last time you read something that had 0 images that you were truly interested in? And it is actually very rare. And if it's not, it means that it's that tiny little like column on the side, right? That you happen to just really be into. That's why you stop to read it. But you want to be able to give the media essentially everything they would need to create an article that you would be happy with too. And providing lots and lots of images that are relevant, obviously, is one of the things that we highly recommend. Very often, I think, like, you know, there's a press release written, and then the only image that's accompanying it is literally the poster of your product or your company logo. Try and envision that in the star. How often do you see that you have an article and then one fella's logo there? And if you do, it's likely an advertorial, which means that they've paid hundreds and thousands of dollars for that spot. You're asking these guys to be interested enough to write this without that happening. So show them why it is that's relevant and make it really easy for them to write it as well, which means that they need to come back with minimal research to be able to get it done. Journalists are quite starved now. There are less journalists, at least in the Malaysian scene now, than there were a year ago. But media are still going out, which means that all of them need to hit the stories that they need to get out as well. So what you can do is try and make their job that much easier before it gets too hard for them to be bothered with your story. So don't just have your company logo, don't just have your fact sheet that was really nicely designed or the front page of your poster to promote your product. Have the product image on its own, have it being used by people, have images of the people who you quoted in the press release, because that gives context to what some of those quotes were. But provide them with the, I guess, richer media that could come in useful. And for the contacts and links, I think like for contact details, you know, I think that goes without saying. Who do they contact if they want to find out more? It shouldn't be a general like contact us at yourbusiness.com. Should be a person that they feel that they're going to get on the other side of the phone or on the other side of the email. Should they want more information. And I also really encourage having, I know a lot of things happen online, encourage having shortened links and hyperlinks. So I know a lot of things go out digitally. It's not back in the day when like sending out like physical press releases. So we feel like it can be a lot neater to just like have a hyperlink. But when they are transferring that onto their, for example, an online piece, it does help for them to be able to refer to a bracketed kind of short URL to check so that your links are right. And why that's really important is, as you would know, like having those backlinks will mean that, you know, your SEO and your search results are a lot higher as well, which means that you're naturally going to be found a lot better even on Google for that. So if you're going to kind of take the trouble to be able to get these media pieces out, you might as well work it such that you maximize your chances of having backlinks in there too. Right? But I think, yeah, the one key takeaway is make it really, really relatable. Journalists are looking for what it is that is going to be relevant for their readers, not what it is that excites them, and definitely not what it is that excites you. They want to know that, hey, actually my readers are going to be really interested in this. So write it as such. Show them why it is that the readers will be interested in it, and then make it super easy for them to be able to publish it. We even give our press releases in multiple formats. So while, you know, nowadays a lot of our press releases may like actually be nicely designed and have images inside and different font types, we will also provide a working Word document version as well, which we know then makes it easy for them to be able to copy and paste large areas of text to be able to put directly into their piece. And so you've got your press release. You've got an idea of who you want to speak to, and you definitely know what it is that you want to say. Some quick do's and don'ts when you're kind of reaching out. The big do is ensure you're researching the media you're reaching out to. And that means what is the section? What has that writer written about before? Finding out who their readers are and what like recent topics have been. Finding out what their lead times are. And this I think is a little bit more relevant for magazines than it is for newspapers and online articles. But are they running on a 4-week lead time, a 6-week lead time? If I want to get into November, when do I need to get you all the materials by to be able to get in there? And if not, you kind of just end up in the early part of the next cycle, which can be detrimental as well. But you want to take an interest in the title that you are pitching your story to. So you can do this by picking up the media itself, reading through it. If it's a daily, reading through it for a few days, picking out kind of like, hey, actually this section, this is quite similar industry to what I'm doing, or I really like what was written here. And you know what, when you approach the journalist about it, when you email her or him, say that, you know, that you've found kind of that relevance and you thought that this might be something that they were interested to, or that you understand that this topic was something that was a series being written, you'd like to be able to input on it as well. Knowing that when I think that one of the worst things is when a media gets something that is so blatantly not going to fit in their section. It's so obvious the research wasn't done. It really is just kind of disrespectful. So, you know, sending an education press release to the sports section will not be relevant unless you're telling them why it is, because we're really focused on the new education, sports education program that we have, and it's being backed by this, and that's why it's relevant in the sports section, for example. But, you know, make sure you know who it is that you're pitching to. The second is to not overlook kind of establishing and building relationships with the individuals. So not reducing a media title to the title. Actually invest in building those relationships, invest in who the journalist is, what it is their interests are, what are some of their issues in their job, and how you can kind of be relevant to make that work. And that kind of like ties into that last point of actually show love and personally acknowledge once you've got that coverage. Actually go, hey, I really liked this. Or even prior to that, building a relationship is, hey, I noticed you wrote this the other day and I think that's really cool. Or posting it and tagging them on Facebook. It's actually it can be a lot easier to kind of develop those relationships where nowadays, you know, kind of liking someone's post and all that is a bit of a relationship builder. Yes, Pramuk, am I saying that right? Pram?
Yes. I had a quick question.
How do I do this?
Let me try and get my video on. Yeah. I just a very quick question.
I think you might be on mute. I can't hear you.
Am I still on mute? Because it doesn't show.
Hello?
I can hear Pramuk.
Yeah. I'm not on mute.
Is it just me? Can everyone else hear him?
Yeah, I can. Can someone else just sound up?
Yep, I can hear him
So
too.
sorry about that.
It's okay. Can you hear me, Renji?
Sorry, that might just
hear me. Just tell them I'm typing the question out in the
okay,
chat.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I can totally hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. That's technology at its best, right?
So sorry.
No, it's not. It's nobody's fault. I had a question on this. I mean, my starting point is I'm not a big fan of these big media type people because I honestly don't know who's reading them anymore and stuff. So that's part of who's your audience, right? But more importantly, when we did try and reach out to them, everybody's dying for revenue. So they were pushing for us to actually pay for ads. So how I mean, all of this is fine and dandy, but if at the end you put in all this time, effort, and come up with something cool, but they say, you know, you got to take out half a page and it's whatever, 15,000 or something, and that's just gonna, you know, it's not a non-starter. So what is the real situation with media companies? Is there a way around this, or do they I mean, everybody still needs content, you know, so what's the go-between, basically?
So there isn't an easy answer to that, except that's a very real issue. And this has been, it's not an issue. It is, I understand where it comes from because the media are businesses as well. They're just a lot more blatant about being businesses now than they were before. So literally, like when I started my career, it would be unheard of that you would see a marketing person when you're having a discussion with an editorial team. It is a very common thing that happens now. And this happens especially so it is, yeah, I like your story and I like what you're selling me, but anyway, also how much are you spending, right? And of course, this also happens because of the kind of brands that we represent, where they're kind of like, oh, I see Unilever, cha-ching, right? And it's just kind of dollar signs. So what I would say is that, and I know it sounds very idealistic, but at the end of the day, that's where what you're giving them really matters. It is a lot harder to get in, which means that if they are doing that, number one, they are incentivized to do that first. But number two, they do not see it as a loss to them for not running your story. They do not see it as everybody kind of ran this up and coming and I did it. Because what they're battling with is, while revenue is one, they also want to have that prestige of being people who had the news first, for example. So for example, like when we speak to clients who actually have no new news, like literally like, hey, I'm trying to sell this. I've been selling it for the past 5 years, but no one's picked it up. Can you go get it into the papers for us? What actually then has to happen is, okay, I'm going to need to create why this is currently relevant and that people are actually going to want their readers to read about it. So it's a tough thing because you're almost trying to make it more expensive for them to turn you away than to just take the money. What I will, for them to push for the money, right? What I will say though is that in our experience, at least, being a local company has its benefits in those areas, in the sense that if you are a Petronas or you are a Heineken or you are, like, there's multi-billions of dollars behind them, media are a lot more inclined to kind of draw that line and go, I'm sorry, your media team hasn't spent money with us for the past 2 years. We can't carry this. We very rarely get that for local businesses. So what I would say, and I'm actually very happy to kind of look through and catch up with you after this on that. But what I would say is that if you were hitting kind of brick walls time and time again on that, is that they didn't quite see the cost of not running it. So for them, they're like, if my readers see it, they don't see it, doesn't make a difference to me. Doesn't matter if paper B, C, D also ran it and we missed out on it. I'm fine with that because I didn't get the money.
Yeah.
There's no way around it, lah. Like what I mean. Like I totally get what you're saying. And to be honest, that's why what we do has immensely diversified to not rely on earned media. So a traditional PR agency, for example, like again, 15 years ago, a lot of people saw it as free coverage, lah, right? Like free media, right? So, okay, yeah, I get a PR agency, then they go get me in newspapers for free or in media for free. Right now, our role has really kind of evolved into communication. So yes, part of it is getting that into the media, but it very rarely is the main objective anymore. The main objective tends to be, how do we create consistent communications that, yes, we get into the media, but also that you are singing the same song across your social media, you're singing the same song to your direct mailers, and so on and so forth. And that's why I feel the peso model is so important. But is there a magic wand to get through? No. But that's also where the relationships tend to help a little bit. Not because, go write my story, but because it gives you a better understanding of why they weren't interested to begin with. You know what I mean? And then that allows you to kind of craft the message better and go, okay, you didn't like this, but what if I were able to give you an exclusive interview with this person? All you need to do is be able to mention that it was brought by us and this is what we do, because you know he's interested in person X. You wouldn't know that if you didn't have that relationship to be able to kind of negotiate that, if that makes sense. Yeah. There's no kind of easy way around that, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, how long ago was this? And if you don't mind telling us a little bit more about the experience, because I'm sure everybody's experienced that, and we experience that on a daily basis as well. I think the difference is that we just identify quicker which ones we know are going to be non-starters with the media and adapt those first.
This past 10 months time is really weird. So I can't really recall exactly when, but it would have been early on. I'm in education. I teach little kids. And it was with the Star, particularly. They basically said, they are exactly what you said. The marketing people are actually involved in content discussions also. So they said, there's actually a push for, and this was through a friend, but not like a professional relationship that you might have with these guys, right? So he was quite basically cutting, say, right now we're trying to push for revenue. So we need to get some ad money in, and then we run the articles based on that. This might have been 6 months ago, maybe yeah, quite early on in the pandemic.
Yeah. No, and I can resonate, I think, with the feeling. But the thing is, it is a living and breathing thing. So at the end of the day, and like I said, I'm very happy to kind of speak to you after as well and see if there is anything that we could tweak and give it a go again, that you could give a go again, like who exactly you were actually speaking to, what you were pushing them to run, when it was happening. If it was actually 6 months ago, was it because their attention at that point was just when they had done their big firing and nobody was writing anything that was unpaid, other than the political news? And whether those kind of, the smallest tweaks kind of make the biggest difference. So I'd be happy to kind of look at that in particular as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. That'd
Yeah.
be helpful.
Yeah.
But, I'm not sure whether, I'm just guessing everybody might be in the same boat. We all probably have a very lean team. So it's we'll probably have to pick and choose where our focus is.
Yeah.
And I'm more inclined towards the paid social media type of content generation. And
Yeah.
trying to see whether, thought leadership and stuff like that.
No, definitely. And I think like it's also a bit of a chicken and egg. So what happens is that we found is that when you build the thought leadership first as well, and even in non-traditional media, that gives a bit more clout for the media too. I've heard you before, oh, you were involved in that. And that kind of helps that through too. So it's kind of all these elements and how that peso model works together. But I wouldn't stop because you got a no from one media. I would stop because like I would use that as an opportunity to understand why it is that they said no, because it's actually quite rare if you are in a lean startup team, and especially in these times, kind of working in education with children, if you are non-funded, that they put a hard no if they liked your story, but they put a hard no because you're not investing. I've seen them do that with multinationals before, but it's very rare in a startup sense. It really does come down to actually what it is that was being pitched. Yeah, if it was relevant, but yeah.
Fair point.
Yeah, no, but thanks for sharing that as well. And like I said, I'm very happy to kind of review actually what you had, if I have any input that may help.
You probably do, but
Yeah.
maybe we'll pick it up later.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think, yeah, that kind of, I guess, yeah, if I go into kind of those don'ts, and I don't think I finished the do's as well, but like offering exclusives, I think that's similar to what I had just kind of said with Pamuk before, which was being able to then go, okay, you don't like that this has gone to everyone, but I can give you that you will be the only Chinese who's running this piece of news, for example, to kind of give them that extra. And offering demos, trials, tours, samples, to be able to actually form more than, hey, this is what I'm doing, please run my release. I guess some of the don'ts really is the not using a lot of jargon and sales language. When it reads like an advertisement, it will be considered an advertisement, and PR is just not that. And the converse of kind of doing that research on each media and section is that don't send email blasts. So, actually which is the opposite, I think, of what you did, Pramuk, where you had a person that you were going to, but don't sell email blasts because it's also very obvious when that's happening, and that the research was not done. And don't be purely kind of self-promotional. Don't expect your branded images to be up all for overnight results. It is a long game, and that relationship building long game, nor be pushy or demanding, right? Now, the last bit that I have here is actually touching on influencer engagement. And I'm just going to say, like 2 minutes on it, because I'm not sure if that's also where the head's at in this room. But I think like is just looking at influencers a little bit more similarly to how you may look at media, in the sense that it is important to actually research for relevant interests, and treating each person as a person. Influencers are not just people with hundreds and thousands or millions of followers on Twitter or Instagram. They are essentially the people who have influence in what you are trying to sell or what you're trying to connect on, which means that, for example, in the parenting sphere, most of the highly influential people are actually kind of nano influencers. They influence a group of 100 people, but they influence them because they really believe in what they are. So your friends are influencers or people that you look at online, and you want to be able to look at what their relevant interests are, not just kind of follow accounts. Similar to media, establish kind of authentic, long-term supportive relationships. They are businesses too, which means that they don't live off free stuff. But having said that, you have a product, you've identified them because you feel that your product or your service is of value to them, whether directly or it speaks to their values. Build on that, not on, hey, but please, can you please tell? If they are passionate about children as well, and they've shown that, but they only have 10,000 followers, that may be someone you want to speak to, because chances are that's what their followers are likely to be interested as well. And I think the last is really more towards people who engage in more elaborate kind of content influencer engagement, but encouraging creativity, because that is a currency on its own, and allowing kind of their creativity to come through. But I think that was all. So in essence, understand your audience, and your audience are the end user. But if you're talking strictly in media relations point of view as well, it is your the person that you're speaking to, the medium that is going to reach your end audience, and understand who they are exactly, what they're looking for, so that you're able to craft something that is undeniably relevant to them. Plan your media and look beyond earned media, and don't look at them in silos. Things that you earn will influence things that you may pay for. Things that you're engaging community on will influence the shareability, and so on and so forth. So look at that as a media mix. Ensure that you're writing something that is newsworthy, not just promotional and not just informational. So use that test of whether it is timely, and so on and so forth. Engage genuinely with the media, not just to get your story out. And do consider influencers, even if you feel it may not be an obvious thing. They're not always something that's expensive, but to be honest, can be very, very highly influential if you find the right people that speak to your audiences. And that takes us to the end.
Yay. Thanks so much,
now
Rengeeta.
I can, no worries.
Okay, so we're actually going to open the floor up to questions. So I know, Nadia, you have something that you'd like to ask. Did you want to do it over video?
Because I've lost my...
You've lost your sorry?
Hi, sorry,
Hi,
this
yes.
is me.
Yes.
Okay, like Prem, I actually, well, you know, I do one branding for a doctor, right? So I've been trying to get him. Okay, so he's got this innovative service, which is stem cell, which is they develop through umbilical cords, baby umbilical cords. And of course, stem cell, they need clinical trials and stuff. So he's gone through all of that. So now what he does is he is a joint preservation expert. And so I've been trying to get him into the media, but because he represents a hospital, well, he works at a private hospital, so they tend to want money. they
Link him
said,
back to the hospital.
Yeah, so they want they want us to pay for it, which is for us is that we want the mass to know about his service and what he does, because it actually helps. You know, instead of like if you have a if you busted your cartilage, right? So there's a few things that you can do. Either you do a TKR, which is a total knee replacement. Before that, what we want to do is we want to help people to preserve what you already have, so you don't have to go through TKR, because it takes a long time to recover, and it's a lot cheaper as well than a $30,000 or a ringgit surgery. And a lot of times, like even the TVs, yeah, they'd ask, okay, so how much your budget? I'm like, okay, we don't have a budget because
Is it me?
Sorry, was her video lagging?
You want to tell people.
Nadia?
Sorry. Can
Sorry,
you guys hear me?
Yeah, can you just
You
repeat the last
Hi.
1 minute? Because the video was breaking on my end, and I think it might have been breaking on Renji's end as well. Sorry about that. Yeah, just the last minute. What were you saying? Okay, it's happening again.
No worries. They would ask money, you know. You now, or is it still lagging?
Okay, now it's okay.
Okay. So basically, we don't have the budget. Well, he doesn't have a budget to go on TV, but because he's not representing the hospital, and the hospital, because they have a lot of specialists, they don't want to just spend on him. So they want to spend on more general advertisement.
And is this service being done by the hospital?
Yeah, it is done by the hospital, but yeah, it can be done at the hospital. Of course, it has to. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know, like immediately this will work, but offhand from what you're saying, similar to Prom, I would encourage you guys to just email me what it is that you had shared as well and who you'd shared them with. I'm happy to just look at that and reply you. But from what it is that you are saying, I can imagine that what the media saw was, here's this innovative procedure and technology that is being done by Hospital XYZ. Here's a spokesperson. We want him to go talk about this procedure so that we can sell more of it. And to them, that would read like an ad. However, suggestions I might have, right? And I don't know what would and wouldn't work. It is trial and error. Suggestions I would have are things like actually looking at relevant existing kind of topics that, let's say, paper X is doing, that is already focused on stem cell, for example, where you're able to then go, okay, great, you're writing about this. This is actually our perspective on this and how you're able to, because then it's no longer about the hospital. It's no longer about what you're trying to sell. It's about what you can do for the newspaper. Are you getting something in return? Yeah, you're kind of being quoted in there. You're kind of being mentioned,
Yeah.
You're being put in there. But it is not, hey, this is what we're doing, go tell everyone so they can come and buy from us, which essentially is how they would look at it. The other idea would be, which is a bit more of a long game, but is who is it that has used this in the past, for example? Is it something that is truly innovative and that others would like to be able to come in and kind of put their names behind as well? Because if the issue is the hospital, then how do we focus on the technology and how do we focus on the human stories of people who have existingly benefited from it? So like what you said in person was fantastic, right? Like that actually before kind of going on to the knee surgery, I can get this done. It's a lot more affordable, which makes it a lot more accessible, which means that a lot more people can have a better quality of life by taking the stem cell technology, right? And treatment.
Yeah.
And so who are the people who will benefit from this? And how is it that we can write it directly for them? And why it is it's relevant for them? And you know what? Where else it is available to? Because essentially that makes it non-news, that makes it non-advertisement already immediately, because you're not directly self-promoting. You're promoting the issue of, for example, the knee replacements and how costly they can be and what alternatives are. This is just one of them. And I think those are just kind of ideas in terms of how do we make it not, here's my product, this way you can get it, this way it's relevant to you, come buy from us. And because you've already kind of hit that block, I feel like you getting that response from the media is a little bit more expected because there's a large hospital behind it versus Prem, for example. I can see that happening a lot more. And then there becomes a counter, like literally a counter effort on how do I remove the hospital being the core of it and really put the people who will benefit from it at the heart of my story, and leading with that, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying it's a magic wand, but we tend to write with, oh, but I want them to say this and I want them to say that, I want them to say that, and end up with what they're going to read as an ad. What's in it for them? But how do we recraft that so that we're kind of removing that barrier? The other trick, Nadia, is also if you say that the hospital is actually investing in certain like advertisements already, the other trick is to get in contact with the editorial team of where they do existingly invest. So if your hospital is already investing in 3 titles and they do so on a consistent basis, what happens is that gives you some negotiating power with their editorial team. Because when they say, oh, but how much will you pay? And you're like, hey,
we've already spent money.
In your, we're an existing partner of yours, right? And this is a really, really important technology that's going to help lots of people. You have a lot more clout to be able to do that in those titles.
Okay.
Right. So again, with some of the big name clients, we do already ask them things like who their friendly media are and where they existingly spend. And it can, for us, it can sometimes be like, oh, it doesn't have to be the particular brand, but your group, who do you spend with? So that when we do get pushback, we already know but we know they're spending with them. And then we are able to kind of push that a little bit harder.
Okay.
So when that marketing person comes into the room, like the proverbial room, it's for a very different reason, because they want to keep your dollars. And if they're not being supportive, they kind of risk that relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe look that up as well and then spend your time on getting those in first.
Can. I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for just one more question. Anybody else want to have a go? No?
I'm just going to put my email address in the chat. But Pram and Nadia, please do feel free to share with me what it is that you had shared with the media, who it is that you shared it with. I'm very happy to kind of give you any input that I can to kind of help that, with your next effort with media engagement.
Oh, I didn't actually get to the point of sharing something. I got in touch with my friend first to figure it out. What do they need? What do they want? And so on. And also at that point in time, we've actually been in existence for 4 years, but essentially we've become a startup because of the pandemic. To use all these sexy, trendy words, we've had to pivot, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're back to ground zero and building up again. So we ourselves are trying to figure out the landing that we should have to try and push out. What is our core message that would resonate with people? So I don't have anything.
Okay. No, and that's fine as well. But again, it's there. And I'm not gonna be charging you anything or whatever. But if anyone in this room does want any help, just feel free to reach out. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about who you are, what it is that you're doing, who it is that you're trying to reach out to, and any suggestions we can give you, we'll be happy to.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So if nobody has any questions, that wraps up Renji's session today. Thanks so much, Renji, for jumping in on this.
And thanks everyone for kind of taking a Saturday to do this.
Yep, especially for us, huh? Okay. Okay, so I will end this breakout session and bring everyone back to the main room. Renji, you can leave already. So for those who have just joined the elective session, particularly Renji's session, thanks again for being with us. So I'll see you back in the main room and I'll make another announcement there, yeah? Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too.